In this lab, we are going to demonstrate how you can insert a record to a database, updating a record from the database, and of course, deleting a record. We are going to use the statement interface for steps 2 to 4. Remember, there are different interfaces that we went through: statement interface, prepared statement interface, and callable statement. So my demonstration here, I'm using statement interface. Okay, now to do this, we need to have the database table created. So the first thing, we need to create a database table from the database that we created before. This code, SQL code, is going to be used to create the database table. I copy this one and I open my database, my MariaDB. Use my database name is DBBIT4, and in this database I want to create this table of student. So I have a table of student created. If so we have one table created. If you use the PHP MyAdmin, it should be able to find one table. For DBBIT4, we have one table which is a student table. Okay, so after creating the database, let's go and insert a new record into our database. Make sure you take note of the fields that are there. We have a database with 4 fields: ID, first name, surname, and income. So let's go to our Eclipse IDE, and as I said, we don't need these things. We can take them off for now. We don't need them, so they can go. We have made our connection, and when we have our connection successful, we can now have a code to connect to to send data to the database and set that data into our database table. And when we are done with our connection, of course, we needed to have a way of closing that connection. So this method of getting a connection returns a value, and the value returns an object, and the object which is returned is a connection object. Therefore, we need to modify this a little bit to receive the object. So we can just receive it using a variable name con. So the connection to the database, the value or the object will be received using this connection object here. And when we are done working with this connection, we should remember to close. So I think we can add the code for closing. So the code for the closing or releasing our resources, we commonly put them under finally, because this block of code, even if there is an error here which will make our code to jump and execute the catch part, then after that we'll still go into finally. So this one ensures that all the resources that were opened here should be closed. So we can have our code closed here. So as we see, the code has been declared as local. We need to take it out and declare it before everything here, and we can have this one maybe to narrow. We can instantiate it to narrow, and here we just use the variable connection. So by doing so, we should be able to close our connection. Let's also change the exception we need to have a specific exception, like a SQL exception for our program here. So we have our exception here specified to be caught for SQL, and we can also make sure that our method throws an exception of the same, which is SQL exception. So it throws SQL exception. So we haven't yet started our program yet. We've just made sure we put things in places. We've made sure we have our connection object, which we can now use to send data to the database. And now we can start sending data to the database. Everything is in place. This connection that we are opening here will be closed in the final block of code when it's successful, and even when something wrong happens. This statement will still be executed to close our resources. Okay, so now let's begin. The first item, or the second item, is to insert a new record. Now let's create a code that will insert a new record into our database. What we need is a statement object, and a statement object. Let's just have our statement object statement. We just call it state. Is a statement object that has been returned from create statement, and the moment this one is created, now we can use this object to send our SQL statement to the database. So let's prepare our SQL statement here. This is SQL statement that we want to send to the database. We want to insert it into student, first name, surname, and amount. And the values we are sending is Ketiwe, Banda, and 250,000. So this is the SQL statement that we are going to send. It's just a string. Now, using the statement object that we've created above, we can now execute our query. We can use execute to execute our query, our SQL, or we can use those other methods as we saw, update or execute query. So in this case, I'll just use the execute. And this method of execute requires a SQL statement, and the SQL statement is what we have defined here, this string. So we are passing a string inside here. So this is how you can insert a record to the database. Then you can have a statement maybe afterwards to say this one successfully done, because the execute returns a boolean which will determine whether the operation was successful or not. So you can get that boolean value and use it to display the right information, whether the execution was successful or not. So in my case, I'm not getting anything. We just have a statement like this one, and this statement is going to insert a record into our database. Let's test this. Let's execute this one. They're saying I have an error, syntax error somewhere. Okay, let me see my SQL statement. Okay, here values, we have Ketiwe, Banda, then this one, and they don't have the closing bracket for the values. Okay, let's try to execute this one again. The error, I don't know why I used this one. I used an amount here, but as you see, our database that have been created, we have income and not amount. So let's change here to income. I hope now we have eliminated all the errors. Let's execute our program. Okay, now it's successfully executed. Our program is successfully executed. We can go to our database and check if there's any record. Maybe let me just use this one. Okay, so let's see if there is any record in our database. We can select everything from student, and let's see. Yeah, so we have one record added to the database. So our insertion is successfully done. We can run the program again to insert another record, which we are going to update later. So let's run the program again to insert the record, another record, into our database. So now we have two records in the database table, but they are duplicate. Now let's try to modify the first one or the second one with ID 2. We should update the details of this one. We don't want it to have the first name as Ketwe and surname as Banda. Let's give it different names. Maybe it should be Alice Piri. And of course, even income should be changed. So let's modify this one. So we are going to comment this section, and I'm going to demonstrate now how we can use the how we can update our information. So the data can come from the user, but in my case this time around the data will just come, will just be hard coded as we did even for this one. So let's have our SQL statement. We want to update the table. We want to update student, and the updating student, we're going to set our first name to Alice, and the surname to Piri, and the income to let's have this one as 300,000. Okay, where ID equals, we want to have an ID of 1. I mean, we want to change the ID of 2. So where ID equals 2. So this is our SQL statement to change or to modify our record. We are going to modify a record with ID of 2. We change the first name to Alice and the surname to Piri, as well as income to that other one. So this is what we are actually doing here. Okay, I hope I have updated this one correctly. Everything is okay. Then let's try to run our program. So we have successfully run our program, and I hope the record here has been updated as well. So this is how you can update. So you provide the SQL statement in its raw form, and it will be executed using execute or even execute update query or whatsoever. So let's have the last one. I think we had 4 items. The last one is to delete a record. So let's delete a record. Which one should be deleted? Okay, let's delete the second one as well. We are going to delete the record. To do so, we need to change this one. This one is for the update, so let me just keep this one for the update, and let me create another one for deletion. So string SQL equals delete delete from student where id equals 1. So this is a statement that will be used to delete a record. So we are going to delete a record which is student number 1. No, I want to delete student number 2, id 2. So let's try to run this statement. And yes, it has run successfully. Let's check if that record is deleted. Now we only have one record. Alice Piri is gone. So that's how you use a that's how you use a statement interface to insert data into the database. So you can use this interface to insert data, to delete, to update, even to retrieve data. We'll look at retrieving data later after covering the prepared statements. We want to have that one covered together. So in my next video, we're going to show you, or I'm going to show you how to use a prepared statement to actually do the same things.